Hey guys, I want to welcome you back to another episode of Pistons Talk Podcast presented by FanDuel. Hope you guys are having a great 4th of July weekend with your friends, family, loved ones, staying safe out there and enjoying some great food. In today's episode, we have 4 segments we're going to be going over. Segment 1 will be about Javonte Green. He did resign with the Detroit Pistons today. We'll be going over that contract and what his role could be this upcoming season. Segment 2 will be going over the Detroit Pistons cap sheet. How close are they to the salary cap? How close are they to the tax line, first and second apron? Are there more small, medium, or bigger moves, which we're kind of hoping for bigger moves, on the horizon for the Detroit Pistons this offseason? Segment 3 will be going over more Kevin Durant stuff. We got more reporting, more intel with the Detroit Pistons' interest in Kevin Durant, potentially. And segment 4 will end the podcast with the Detroit Pistons and Austin Reaves. Obviously, you know, he was a free agent target. We now know what the Detroit Pistons' initial offer was for Austin Reaves, so we'll be going over that. Should be a maybe 20-25 minute episode at the most. Really, it depends on how many rabbit holes and how long I yap, right? So let's get into segment 1, Javonte Green. So he did re-sign with the Detroit Pistons today. 1 year, $3.95 million deal per Shams Charania. And I think the one thing I want to go over with you guys is his role and why I think this was actually important for the Detroit Pistons. But if you guys didn't see the tweet, let me put it on the screen real quick for you guys. So, from Shams Charania, says free agent forward Javonte Green has agreed to a 1 year, $3.5 million deal to return to the Detroit Pistons, sources tell ESPN. Green played all 82 games for the Pistons a season ago. He averaged 6.9 points, 17.6 minutes, and he shot 38.1% from three. The three-point percentage was actually like a really big surprise. And before I kind of go into his role and this overall signing and my reactions with it, last summer I did not know if this guy was going to be on the roster. Like, I will raise my hand and say, yeah, I was an idiot. I thought this was a depth piece. I thought this was just cool, like, okay. But he shocked me, shattered my expectations, was one of the leaders off the bench in steals per game, along with Ron Holland. Those two together just absolutely caused havoc. I believe they were top 5 together in steals per game. A lot of deflections with Javonte Green. Just a really gritty defender. And kind of a culture fit, if you do ask me. Like, Javonte Green just kind of screams Detroit Piston, and kind of going down like the culture fit avenue. When you lose a guy like Isaiah Stewart was a really big piece and a big culture fit. When you lose a veteran in Tobias Harris that was your starting power forward, brought so much professionalism on and off the court, I think it was really important to retain one of your lead veterans that was a leader off the bench. And I know it's a 1 year deal. I know it's a guy that only averaged about 7 points a game, didn't really provide too much offensive spark, but I think it's important to bring a guy that kind of fits your identity, fit your culture. You won 60 games last year as a number 1 seed. And I think if you lost Javonte Green, Tobias Harris, and Isaiah Stewart in one offseason, it's going to be pretty tough for the Detroit Pistons to kind of have that defensive identity that they really pride themselves on. But my just overall reaction with it was kind of relieved. I was like, thank God. I know some people were upset by it because they think that he's going to take minutes away from Ron Holland when, in fact, those two actually played off the bench together. They were both playing backup small forward and backup power forward on the floor together, so I don't really know why there was so much, dislike with this deal. Like, you need veterans on this team. We see how important veterans have been these past 2 seasons with the Detroit Pistons in the win column and, come playoff time, obviously. But again, it's a 1 year, $3.9 million deal. I'm not really too upset about it, but again, I saw some Pistons fans like actually crashing out with this acquisition. I will say though, so many of you guys, not like people watching on YouTube, but like my Twitter timeline, they have hated like every free agency move we've made. They hated the John Collins move. They hated the Kevin Herter signing. They hated the Javonte Green signing. Kind of mixed reactions on the Isaiah Joe signing, probably because they don't know who he is. Like if you want to find a casual fan, go on Twitter. Like, go on Twitter. Like, Pistons Twitter is so toxic right now. So toxic. Like, people are, like, got the pitchforks out for Trajan Langdon to get fired. I was like, man, this is where we're at. Okay. It's off season. I get it. Like, other teams in the East are getting better, but I mean, Pistons aren't done, I don't think, and that kind of segues perfect into our next segment, which is segment 2. So segment 2, are there still more moves to be made? Now, with the Javonte Green signing, the Pistons currently do have 15 players on the roster. I had a brain fart there for a second. I had to think for a minute. And we're going to put a cap sheet on the screen. And this does come from Yossi Goslin. So he's actually over at Hoopsite. Very similar to Keith Smith, just the way that they kind of just keep track of everything. So this Detroit Pistons, after signing Javonte Green, $34 million below the luxury tax line, which they won't exceed this season. They could give Jalen Duran a starting salary in the low $30 million range. So, again, like when you look at the Pistons cap space breakdown, after signing Javonte Green, you're $34 million below the luxury tax line. You have 15 players that are currently on the roster, which I'm assuming this does include Marcus Sasser because he hasn't been traded yet. You're at $166.4 million when the salary cap floor is at $165, so you're over it by a couple $1 million. Hard cap for the first apron. You can still take back more salary because you're not at the luxury tax line. You still have a non-taxpayer mid-level exception at $15 million. You have a trade exception that does expire in 4 days. And you can re-sign Jalen Duran with bird rights. You have 7 future first-round picks, 4 that you can trade right now, and 13 second-round picks. So there are more moves for the Detroit Pistons to make, you guys. There are 100% more moves for this organization to look at. Now, is it a small move like we've seen these like John Collins, Isaiah Joe moves? Possibly. Is it kind of like more of a medium tier move? Maybe a guy that's like on a $20 million salary? Possibly. Or is it that big splash that everyone's just like pounding the table for? Like they want the Tyler Hero, they want the Trey Murphy, they want the Kyrie Irving. Like I could just go down the list of like all the players that I've heard. The Pistons can absorb more salary if they want to get near the tax line. And I think you have an owner in Tom Gores that has said, I'm willing to spend multiple times. I mean, he paid Monty Williams to go away. I'm sure he's willing to spend to get close to the luxury tax line. He's paid the tax line in previous regimes with previous teams. So you're just barely over the salary cap with 15 players on the roster. I think once the trade does become official with Marcus Sasser, you'll go from 15 players on the roster to 14 because you probably won't be taking anything back in that multiple team trade, which I think it will be a 5-team trade if I did have to guess. Anywhere from 3 to 5 just kind of depends on which teams are going to be involved. But I do think there is a bigger move on the horizon for the Detroit Pistons, and I think that's what a lot of Pistons fans want. But you look at kind of like where they're at with the cap space and how far away they are from the luxury tax line. Like $34 million, like that's a guy that you kind of look at like Trey Murphy, who would fit into that, and you wouldn't be that close to the luxury tax line. Obviously, Jalen Duran still needs to be done, but they can definitely make another move if they do see fit. But again, we're gonna have to wait and see what does happen with Jalen Duran and his new contract. There's been a lot of reporting with what the Pistons are comfortable with paying him. It's around $35 million. 30 to 35, I think, is more than acceptable, kind of considering the playoffs that he did have. So I think it's just a wait and see approach. If I did have to guess, though, I think it does get done before Summer League starts, just because I don't think the Detroit Pistons front office, or even JB Bickerstaff for that matter, wants to go on Amazon Prime or ESPN when they do those sit-down interviews during the Summer League and get asked questions about Jalen Duran. So they probably want to get a deal done. It's just a lot of negotiations between Jalen Duran's representation and Trajan Langdon and what this front office wants to pay Duran. Multiple people have reported that $35 million is the most that the Detroit Pistons are willing to go. They are not going to meet the $200 million demand that we've heard from multiple national reporters, even Pistons guys here locally that do cover the team. Pistons are just not willing to pay him that $200 million, which, hey, man, if you want to stand firm, stand on 10 toes and not overpay for him, as a Piston fan, I appreciate that. Like, you're just not going to fold like a lawn chair and just give him the $200 million because he asked for it, right? I know we've had previous regimes where they would just get extensions done and just pay these guys as quick as possible. This regime is a little bit more calculated with like what they want to do. So I still think there are more moves to be made, but I do feel like Jalen Duran could be holding up that just because of the negotiation tactics that we've seen with his agent and stuff like that. So should be a very interesting offseason. Pistons obviously aren't done. They will be making more moves. Let's go into segment 3, Kevin Durant. So we talked about it yesterday. There was a podcast from Clutch Points who have their own NBA podcast, and they had talked about Kevin Durant. They talked about the Detroit Pistons, that 3-team trade conversation that was just a conversation. Obviously, the Rockets did not like the conversation. They ended it pretty quickly. But there is still more talk about Kevin Durant and the Detroit Pistons. So we have another tweet that we are going to be putting on the screen for you guys, and this does come from Clutch Points. Pistons interested in Kevin Durant. Detroit expected to be at the front of the line if Durant becomes available via trade. The Pistons have strong interest in trading for Kevin Durant. Multiple sources told Clutch Points if Durant becomes available in any capacity of the Rockets, look at a possible trade involving him either now or in the near future. The Pistons are fully expected to be at the front of the line on his services. So I know a lot of people yesterday when we had talked about this initially with the report of Kevin Durant, mixed opinions, and I get it. I think there are some people that look at Kevin Durant, the bucket that he is, even at his advanced age, he's still a bucket. He's still got buckets for Houston this year. I think Houston is in a space where they want to be competitive in the Western Conference. They signed Fred VanVleet towards Achilles. There was nothing they could do about it. And they tried to find point guards. Last year, they just couldn't do it because they were just so close to the tax line that they didn't want to go over. And KD was incredible for them, but really couldn't give it a go in the playoffs against the Lakers. They were first round exit, and I think obviously they have higher aspirations and higher goals to make it out of the West with a healthy Houston this year with the Men Thompson, Sengun, KD, and others. But the Pistons aren't really kind of giving up. They're still seeing like what Houston would possibly want, and I have no idea what a Kevin Durant trade would look like. I would assume Houston does kind of covet some of our younger guys like an Asar Thompson, like a Ron Holland. I don't know if they would have too much interest in Jalen Duran because they do have Alper and Sengun, even though he did have a kind of underwhelming playoffs. Like Rui Hachimura actually had that man in a box. But I think there's been so much conversation about the Detroit Pistons not doing anything and sitting on their hands when, in fact, like a lot of the big moves that we hear in these initial reports, it's been the other teams just kind of backing out and just cutting the deals dead. Like, Trajan is just on the phones constantly this offseason, seeing where they can get better. Like, the next segment, we're going to talk about Austin Reaves. Like, Pistons were real players for Austin Reaves. They're trying to see what it could take to get a Kevin Durant. There were reports about them calling about Kyrie Irving before Masai Ujiri even got there. There's just been so many reportings of the Pistons trying to, get Cade that second score. I think KD does fit into that second score conversation. He really does. It just really depends what the package is and if Houston does want to trade him, whether it's this week or possibly at the trading deadline. I think if they do trade him, though, it'd probably be this week. It just wouldn't be at the trading deadline. I think if KD does get moved in any type of capacity, it will be this week. And, I mentioned yesterday that, like, out of all of the NBA players, he's always shown Cade Cunningham love from his rookie year to doing a podcast this past season with Boardroom, kind of getting to know him a little bit more. Like he's always been a really good mentor to Cade Cunningham. And I know some people think that he's a locker room cancer, alleged burner accounts, stuff like that. I understand it, but I can't deny if you had like a Cade, Kevin Durant, you're able to keep Asar Thompson, you're able to still keep Jalen Duren, and you have John Collins. Like, that's a really intriguing starting five. Whoever starts shooting guard, I don't know if it's Duncan, Isaiah Joe, whatever. Like, that would be actually really intriguing. I think it does make the Pistons better. I think it would make them competitive in a very stacked Eastern Conference this upcoming season. But, again, it really depends if Houston is willing to move off of him. Even though they did give up some assets to get him, what was like Jalen Green, Dylan Brooks, and some future draft capital. They didn't really have to give up too much to get KD, but I would just keep an eye on it. Pistons are very active in the trade market, trying to get better, trying to make this team more competitive, trying to get Cade Cunningham, that secondary scorer. I don't think their offseason is done by any means. I don't think they go into the offseason saying, we lost Tobias Harris, here's John Collins, we need more three-point shooting, here's Isaiah Joe, and we drafted Abuka Okori. I don't think that's their offseason. I think they know they have to get Cade Cunningham, a secondary scorer, and they are on the phones with basically every team in the NBA to try to get this team better. Because I see some people just saying that Trajan's not doing anything. We don't really know what the conversations that he's having. We just don't know. But all the reports are kind of signaling that he's on the phones trying to get another All-Star next to Cade. We're going to wrap up the podcast with the Austin Reaves segment. So initially, like right before free agency started, there were reports that the Hawks and the Pistons were two teams that had internal interest in going after Austin Reaves in free agency. And right away, when the Lakers heard that the Pistons were going to be aggressive, because initially they only offered Austin Reaves $30 million, they actually inked a deal with him to come back to LA. So it says Detroit was prepared to offer a max before LA moved quickly. The Pistons were going to sign Austin Reaves to a max contract, which forced the Lakers to quickly offer him the $185 million. Now, Austin Reaves was a restricted free agent. It's much like Jalen Duren right now, where when you're in restricted free agency, you can only offer one less year and, around like, the $40 million range, right? Obviously, the Lakers heard and knew how much interest the Pistons did have, and they decided just to offer him more money, so Detroit didn't have the opportunity to do so. I did say last week it kind of felt like a 4D chess move by Trajan to kind of just make them use more of their cap space so they couldn't offer Jalen Duren a max deal. They ended up offering Utah a trade package for Walker Kessler to be their starting center. Obviously, there was a lot of interest with Jalen Duren and the Los Angeles Lakers for the past two seasons. Also, Walker Kessler, they were just waiting to see if Utah was going to deal him. And, when you're offering that many picks for Walker Kessler, I think Utah was extremely happy. They're still going through a rebuild, but Danny Ainge is not going to say no to future first. I don't know if the Lakers offer the Pistons any type of trade package for future first. I don't know. Maybe some reporting will come out after the offseason is over, but it's interesting that the Pistons are willing to go to a restricted free agency max for Austin Reaves. Pretty damn interesting if you do ask me, because it kind of tells you that the team was willing to go get Cade that secondary star. And I know some people talk about Austin Reaves and say, like, Anthony, he's like a terrible defender. Still a bucket, though. Like, he took a really big scoring uptick this past season with the Lakers. And the Lakers have Luka Doncic and Austin Reaves now. Obviously, LeBron James has decided to leave and sign with the new team. But pretty interesting stuff, coming out of LA. Now, we do have to hear from our sponsors over at the FanDuel Sportsbook. And right now, you guys, you can place future bets. Right before we do wrap up this podcast, you guys, we have to hear from our sponsors over at the FanDuel Sportsbook. So right now, FanDuel has Central Division winner odds, and the Pistons are odds-on favorite to win at a -175. Cleveland's at a +230. Indiana's at a +480. Milwaukee's at a +20,000, and Chicago is at a +25,000. Pretty interesting to see that the Detroit Pistons are the odds-on favorite to win their division for a second consecutive season. But hey, man, as a Piston fan, I absolutely love to see it. But let me know what you guys think of tonight's podcast with the Austin Reaves report, the Kevin Durant trade talk with the Pistons being right at the front of the line if he does become available, and if Houston is willing to get off of his contract and trade him to the Detroit Pistons. The Detroit Pistons salary cap. Do you guys also feel that there's another big move with the Pistons being $34 million away from the tax line and pretty far away from the first and second apron? And segment one with Javonte Green, are you guys okay with this one-year deal that the Detroit Pistons did give him, a $3.9 million deal? Talk to you guys down below in the comment section. Like always, hope you guys are staying safe. Take care. We'll catch you guys in the next podcast episode. Peace.